In the dusty town of Ebu, where rusted zinc roofs shimmered under a hot sun and roadside stalls were held together by old nails and stubborn hope, there lived a woman named Mama Neka. She was a widow, short and strong, with arms that bore years of carrying firewood, yams, and heartbreak. Every morning before the cock crowed twice, she was already awake, boiling water over a small charcoal stove to prepare yam porridge. With her only daughter, Ifunanya, she set up their stall by the roadside, an old wooden table under a crooked umbrella. Life was unkind, but Mama Neka was not. She greeted everyone. Whether they bought food or not, she smiled and said, "Good morning, my child." She'd offer a spoonful to children too young to beg properly. And even when Ifunanya protested, she'd say, "The gods are watching. We give not because we have much, but because it is right." One evening, just as the sun bled into the earth, they noticed a boy, dirty, barefoot, and crouched near the gutter. His legs were twisted, his shirt torn at every edge. He said nothing, just stared at the pot. Ifunanya pulled her mother's sleeve. "Mama, we don't have extra." But Mama Neka was already scooping from the pot. She placed the hot yam porridge in a plastic bowl, walked to the boy, and knelt. "Eat. You look like hunger is trying to bury you." The boy looked at her, stunned, then at the food. He mumbled, "Thank you." Before eating so fast, tears welled in his eyes. He came back the next day, and the day after, always silent, always hungry, and always fed. Neighbors scoffed. Some said, "He's cursed. Look at his legs." Others whispered, "That one? He's mad. Watch him closely." But Mama Neka never stopped. Ifunanya grew used to it, even began greeting him with a nod. They never asked his name. He never told it. And then one day, he disappeared. It had been weeks. The boy never returned, and though no one spoke of it, a quiet space lingered where he used to sit. Mama Neka would glance at the empty gutter corner each evening, her hands slower with the ladle. Ifunanya tried to distract her. "Mama, maybe he found a shelter." "Maybe," Mama said, but her voice had less hope than prayer. The season shifted. Harmattan came. The winds turned dry and cruel. Fewer customers came to the stall, and the yam pot often went unfinished. Still, she saved a portion each evening, wrapping it in a leaf and placing it near the boy's old spot. He might come back hungry, she told herself, but the food remained untouched. Then, one afternoon, as she closed her stall early, a group of boys ran past, shouting, "They're hiring at the big plaza, new supermarket." Ifunanya lit up. "Mama, let's go. Maybe they need kitchen help." Mama hesitated. She was tired. Her knees ached more each day, but she followed. At the plaza, sleek and foreign-looking, they queued behind a crowd. One by one, applicants entered and came out, most shaking their heads. When Mama and Ifunanya finally reached the front, a young receptionist eyed them up and down. "Name?" "Neka," she said. "Wait here." They sat for an hour, then two. Finally, a tall man stepped out, well-dressed, calm, and unmistakably familiar. He walked slowly toward them, his eyes fixed only on Mama Neka. "You don't remember me, do you?" Mama Neka squinted at his face. His suit was crisp, his shoes shining, his voice smooth. So unlike the boy she remembered, but those eyes, the same eyes that once welled with tears over a bowl of yam. I don't, she said. He smiled. I used to sit by the gutter every day. You fed me. Her hand flew to her mouth. Ifunanya gasped. Chukwu, she whispered. The crippled boy? He nodded. My name is now Chuka. But yes, that was me. But how? It's a long story, he said. But one I want you to hear, in comfort. He turned to the receptionist. Cancel the interviews. Positions filled. Ifunanya looked confused. Which position? The head of the supermarket kitchen. And you, young lady, are starting culinary school next week. On my dime. They followed him inside. The office was air-conditioned and smelled of fresh wood polish. He offered them cold malt drinks and sat across the desk. I was taken in by a woman after I vanished, he explained. She ran a charity, gave me food, then school, then a scholarship. I worked hard. And when I got my first job, I started saving, with one dream, to come back and find the woman who fed me first. Not with millions, just with love. Tears rolled down Mama Neka's cheeks. I never expected anything. You gave me everything, he said. Outside, the plaza crowd had begun to disperse. The sun dipped low, painting the sky gold. Inside, kindness had found its way home. The days that followed were strange, beautiful but strange. Mama Neka, who once walked barefoot on cracked roads, now had polished sandals and a personal driver. Ifunanya, who used to fetch water from the stream, sat in a classroom learning about nutrition and cuisine. But Mama never let it all get to her head. Each morning, she still woke up early, knelt by her bedside, and whispered prayers, long and slow, like she always had. Only now, her thank you came before her pleas. Chuka visited them every week, sometimes to check on their needs, other times to just talk. He never acted like a boss, always like a son. He brought gifts, books, new pots, sometimes bread from bakeries Mama had never stepped into. But he also brought silence. Sometimes Chuka would sit on their porch staring into space. When Mama asked what he was thinking about, he would smile and say, "About you. About how different life would have been if you had ignored me that day." One afternoon, Chuka invited them to a dinner, a big celebration, the supermarket's anniversary. Mama Neka was nervous. "I don't have anything fancy to wear," Chuka laughed. "You'll wear dignity. That's more expensive than any cloth." At the event, Chuka stood on stage, holding a microphone. The hall was packed, staff, investors, community elders. He cleared his throat and said, "Before I say anything about this supermarket, I want to tell you about yam porridge." And he told the story of hunger, of shame, of a bowl offered without a question. When he finished, the hall was silent. Then it erupted in applause. Chuka called her to the stage. Mama Neka tried to refuse, but he insisted. "Come, Mama. They need to see you." Mama Neka walked slowly to the stage, her steps uncertain. The bright lights made her squint, and the silence in the room pressed against her chest like a weight. But as she reached Chuka's side, he held her hand firmly. He raised her arm. "This," he said, "is the woman who taught me what wealth really means." The audience stood, a standing ovation. Some wiped tears. Others clapped like they couldn't stop. Mama Neka didn't know what to say. She simply bowed her head. After the dinner, more surprises followed. Chuka gave her keys, not just to a house, but to a brand new kitchen space behind the plaza, fully equipped. You will run your own small restaurant, he said. Your recipes, your name, your rules. Ifunanya hugged her mother tightly. You did this, Mama. You did all this with porridge. The opening of the restaurant became a celebration in Ebu. People who once mocked her now lined up to buy food. They called it Mama's Pot. The first customer? Chuka. He didn't take a seat. He stood at the counter and said, just like old times, only now I pay. And he did. For everyone behind him in line. Word spread. Newspapers came. Bloggers posted. The woman who fed a beggar became a symbol of true kindness. But Mama Neka still prayed every morning, still gave free food to hungry children, still smiled at everyone who passed by. Because she never did it for fame. She did it because she believed, even in a world as hard as Ebu, that love, when shared without measure, finds its way back. Months passed, and Mama Neka's restaurant became a cornerstone of Ebu. Tourists visited, locals boasted. The food was honest, warm, and unforgettable, just like the woman behind it. But for Mama, the most valuable moments weren't the crowd or the coins. It was the quiet times, the soft thank you from a hungry child, the way Ifunanya now taught others how to cook, the way her own hands, once calloused from firewood, now stirred pots with purpose. One rainy evening, Chuka arrived late. He looked tired, not physically, something deeper. He sat at the edge of the counter and said, Mama, can I stay here tonight? Of course, she said, wiping her hands. What's troubling you? He hesitated. I have everything, yet I feel lost. Mama poured hot tea into a tin cup and placed it in his hands. Then maybe you need to return to where you were found. He looked confused. You came here empty and broken, not just your body, but your soul. And here, you were fed. Not just food, but care, gratitude, forgiveness. Chuka took a long sip. Do you regret it, Mama, giving to me that day? She smiled. How can you regret planting a seed that became a tree? The rain fell harder outside. Thunder rolled. Inside, the small kitchen glowed. He looked at her like a son looks at a mother, truly, fully. That night, Chuka didn't return to his big house. He slept on the couch beside the fire, wrapped in the same warmth that had once saved him. And outside, the town of Ebu breathed slowly. It knew. Some homes were built with walls, but the best ones were built with love. The next morning, light broke gently through the clouds. The rain had washed the streets clean. Mama Neka stirred a pot of fresh ogbono soup, humming softly. Chuka woke to the smell. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. For a moment, it felt like he was that boy again. Hungry, cold, invisible. Mama, he said. She turned, smiling. Sleep well? He nodded. I'm making your favorite, she said. Just like before, no pepper, plenty crayfish, he chuckled. You remember? I remember everything I feed with love. They ate together quietly. No phones, no noise, just food and memory. Later that day, Chuka surprised her again. He walked her to a small plot of land not far from the plaza. "I bought this," he said, "for a foundation." "A what?" "A feeding center for street kids, for anyone who's hungry and forgotten. I want to call it Mama's Table." Her eyes filled. "You don't have to name it after me." "But I want to," he said, "because if you hadn't fed me, I wouldn't be here. And maybe hundreds more won't ever know what a warm meal can do." Mama touched the red soil with her hand. "Then plant it deep, my son. Let it grow strong." And so began the next chapter. Mama's Table opened 3 months later. No locks, no menu. Just food, stories, and dignity. And at the center of it all, a photo on the wall of a woman handing a bowl of yam porridge to a boy beside a gutter. Years later, children still lined up outside Mama's Table each morning. Some barefoot, some shy, but all hungry, and every one of them left with more than food. They left with their heads a little higher. They learned, through stories told by old women near the pot, that kindness wasn't a luxury. It was a strength. Chuka grew older. He expanded his business, built schools, sponsored scholarships. But every major decision began with a stop at Mama's Table, a place he called his compass. Mama Neka never asked for credit. She never stood for speeches or wore medals. But her name echoed in quiet corners, in whispered prayers, in grateful tears. Ifunanya became a chef, the first in Ebu to publish a cookbook. On the dedication page, she wrote, "To my mother, who fed the world with a single bowl." And one day, when Mama Neka's hands grew too weak to stir pots, she sat near the window of the restaurant, watching the sunrise hit the photo of that old moment. A bowl, a boy, and a beginning. A little girl approached her once, dirty, thin, nervous. "Mama," she asked, "why do you give food to people you don't know?" Mama smiled. "Because once I gave food to someone I didn't know, and he became everything I never dreamed." And outside Ebu bloomed, because kindness, like roots, runs silent, but it lifts entire forests. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please give the video a like, share what you learned in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting tales like this one. Thank you for being part of the journey.